Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Shotgun Wedding Bells by Joanna Campbell Slan, narrated by Amy Mcfadden. 1. Our wedding day dawned like a scene from a fairy tale. Frozen rain coated the freshly fallen snow. The glassy surface glistened like a million tiny diamonds. Icicles hanging from the eaves of our house formed natural prisms, casting rainbows across the blanket of white. Sunlight transformed the long-dead banks of mums into mounds, like glittering pillows under a white duvet. The scene before us was beautiful, but treacherously slick. This overnight winter storm had paralyzed travel throughout the St. Louis area. All the salt and sand we'd tossed down on the walkways hadn't done much good. Our friend, Detective Stan Hodcho, guided me along the flagstones by means of a good grip on my elbow. He escorted me from the back door of our house to the gazebo. As we walked, Leighton Haversham, our former landlord and dear friend, snapped photos so I could make a memory album. That's what I do. I'm a scrapbooker and owner of a store called Time in a Bottle. At the stairs to the gazebo, I stared up into the smiling faces of the people so dear to me. My newly adopted son, Eric, my daughter, Anya, Eric's aunt, Lorraine Lauber, our nanny, Bronwyn Mcfadden, my fiance, Detective Chandler Lewis Detweiler, and, of course, our animal friends, my dog Gracie and Lorraine's dog Paolo. They'd all stood there patiently in the cold, waiting for me to arrive. Detweiler reached down to take my gloved hand so I could step up and join him. His eyes were warm with emotion, and his gaze was steady. Moist clouds of exhalations floated around all our faces, forming gossamer veils of moisture. As we turned to face Lorraine, who would be conducting the ceremony, Detweiler wrapped an arm around my waist. Correction, a small portion of my waist. At 8.5 months pregnant, I'm the size of the Goodyear blimp. Or at least that's how it feels. But Detweiler loves me. I'm carrying our baby, and our other 2 children are happy and healthy. Even though the overnight storm was keeping much of our extended family from joining us today, our wedding would be a joyous event. Detweiler's shoulder brushing up against mine, so strong and solid, augured a good start to the rest of our lives. We stood side by side, exactly the way we intended to go through life, as friends and lovers. "Not too bad for a wedding thrown together in 48 hours, he whispered in my ear as Lorraine, a.k.a. Aunt Lori, opened her prayer book. There was a chuckle in his voice. I tried not to giggle. Although I have been dreaming about marrying Detweiler ever since I met him nearly 3 years ago, this day was a long time coming. Even though I kept telling myself that a ceremony was only a formality, deep down I really wanted to wear a wedding band again, as long as it was his. The legalities of our relationship might not matter much to Detweiler and me, but they could matter terribly to our 2 kids and to the baby who was kicking imaginary field goals inside me. I'd learned the hard way that the legal system can be your best friend and your worst enemy. Initially, I'd planned for us to get married in the gap between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Detweiler and I had even talked about flying our whole family to Las Vegas and visiting the wedding chapel inside a Denny's. The kids would have loved that combination. Wedding bells and pancakes. But my friend Clancy Whitehead reminded me, "You're 8 months along. They don't allow women that pregnant on a plane." Oops, who knew? I'd tabled that project and made a notation on my calendar to revisit our wedding plans after December 25th. I would have hurried through the holiday season and put the idea out of my head, except for something unsettling that happened to my son. My sisters, Amanda and Catherine, had asked if they could spend a Saturday baking cookies with my kids. Of course, I said yes. Anya and Eric were delighted. From the big smiles on their faces, they'd had a wonderful time. "Look, Mama Kiki," said Eric as he offered up a small shopping bag. Inside there were 2 shoeboxes and 2 Pringles cans filled with yummy treats. "I've got one, too." Anya grinned at me. "We'll have plenty to share with Aunt Lori and Leighton." After thanking my sisters profusely, I hustled my children out to the car. My mouth began to water as we were pulling away from the curb of the rental house my sisters share with my mother. The car's interior smelled wonderfully of butter, sugar, and vanilla. Now and then I caught a whiff of cinnamon. Sometimes playing chauffeur is a drag, but there is an undeniable magic that happens when you're looking out the front window and your children are in the back seat. Remember Art Linkletter, how he said that kids say the darndest things? Something about car rides encourages that, especially longish car rides. We were merging onto the heavy traffic on Highway 40 when Eric explained to me that because Detweiler and I weren't married, our new baby would be a litter mate. A litter mate? I adjusted my rearview mirror so I could look at him. My son's solemn face stared back at me. His chocolate brown eyes, his mocha-colored skin, and his red hair testified to his biracial heritage. He might not be the child of my womb, but he's certainly the child of my heart. From the moment I set eyes on him, I fell in love with that little boy. A litter mate? I don't understand what you mean, sweetie. Anya rolled her eyes and explained. He means ILLEGITIMATE. It took me a while to put those letters into a word. When I did, I nearly drove off the road. Eric, honey, who was talking to you about the baby being a litter mate? Grandma Collins? He said, mangling my mother's last name, Collins. My mother, that paragon of parenthood. I gritted my teeth. That figures. Although she didn't know it, my mom had just moved one step closer to an apartment in assisted living. Mom wasn't aware yet, but the rental house was going up for sale. My sisters and I had several meetings, trying to decide how to cope with our aging parent. In the end, we decided to wait until after the holidays were over. Calling my child illegitimate marked a new low, even for her. I told myself to shrug it off, to consider the source, but Anya turned her denim blue eyes on me and said, "She's right, Mom." "Don't worry," I said. "Detweiler and I still have plenty of time to tie the knot." 2 hours later, the contractions started. 2. Brawny, which is the nickname of our Scott nanny, handles everything with aplomb. "Braxton Hicks," she said, after she timed my contractions by watching the second hand on her watch make its rounds. "Who is Braxton Hicks, and how do I phone him?" Detweiler waved his cell phone in one hand. At the first sign of my distress, he had jumped up from the dinner table and run to my side. "Braxton Hicks means false labor," said Brawny in a soothing voice. "Of course you'll want to take Kiki to the hospital to be sure, but I'm fairly certain that our wee lad isn't coming yet." "Of course I'll take her to the hospital." Detweiler looked at Brawny as if she'd suggested we sacrifice a lamb on our dining room table. "Help me get her to the car." Brawny grabbed my woolen cape and draped it over my shoulders. "Anya, stay with your brother, please. I notice you haven't touched those peas. Eat them, or there's no dessert." The nanny wrapped an arm around my waist and pointed me toward the door. Detweiler proceeded to run around in circles, trying to find his car keys, in his pants, his utility belt, locked in the gun safe upstairs as always, his cell phone, also in his pants, and his wallet, in his hand. Brawny and I hobbled through the kitchen and down the hallway toward the garage. As we did, our Harlequin Great Dane, Gracie, started whining, but not because she was worried about me. She loves Detweiler best, even though I'm the person who adopted her. Her canine sixth sense informed her that if I was leaving, he was taking off too. I'm sure you're right about it being a false alarm. I've got almost a month to go. 25 days, Detweiler yelled from inside the house. It's not so bad for him to do a trial run to the hospital, Bronnie whispered. Let him get the kinks out. Prepare him for the real thing. See you in a couple of hours. I slid into the cold passenger seat of the police cruiser. I'll have Eric in bed and Anya hard at her studies. Don't worry about a thing. Detweiler raced into the garage and around his car clockwise, then counterclockwise to check on me, then clockwise to open his door, and then counterclockwise to make sure my seatbelt wasn't too tight across my belly. With lights and siren blazing, we sped off into the night, alarming all of our Webster Groves neighbors in the process. He tried talking to me, but the result was gibberish. I covered my mouth to keep from laughing. Considering that he's a homicide detective who copes with tragedy and high drama on a daily basis, you'd think he would have handled my impending delivery in a calm, cool, collected manner. But here's his secret. The one thing that Chad Detweiler has wanted his whole life has been to have a family. Even as a little kid, he'd tell his mother, "When I get married and have my own children." Thelma Detweiler thought it an adorable trait. I agree. We broke speed limits right and left. I smiled to myself. Chad Detweiler was going to make a wonderful father to our son. He'd already proven that by how he acted toward Anya and Eric. As long as he didn't crash the car on the ride to the hospital, we were well on our way to fulfilling his dream. With one little hitch. We weren't officially married. 3. Standing there in the gazebo, a wonderful sense of peace descended on me. Leighton kept snapping photos, which would make a beautiful wedding album. I was wearing a heavy white gown, thick with handmade lace. Leighton had donated his mother's damask and lace tablecloths so that Bronnie, that marvel of domesticity, could whip up a special gown for my wedding day. The long sleeves came to a point at my wrists. The high waist reminded me of the gown of a medieval princess I'd once seen in a painting. Bronnie even managed to concoct a sort of cape with a hood to keep me warm. It was a kind gesture. Even though pregnancy had cranked up my natural thermostat to a near feverish pitch, my ears still got cold. To my left stood Eric and Anya, bundled up in their winter coats, scarves, gloves, and hats, and with solemn expressions on their faces. To my right was Detweiler in his navy blue dress uniform. Hodcho had taken his place at Detweiler's side. Bronnie stood stoically at the far left, helping me bookend the children. She was wearing her uniform, a tartan skirt, knee socks, brogues, and a woolen cape. Next to Bronnie stood Gracie, shivering in the cold. I turned my attention to our minister, Lorraine, a stooped figure in a full-length black mink coat. Because of a recent flare-up of her MS, she was leaning hard on her walker. Leighton was at her elbow to steady her. Her guard dog, Paolo, a giant schnauzer, scooted to one side to give the man access. As Lorraine found the correct page in her prayer book, I drank in my surroundings. The world was achingly beautiful. Yet another layer of snow had been falling all morning. The large oak tree never wore such a splendid white mantle. A serene silence reigned, broken only by the occasional tinkle of the wind chimes that Leighton had hung at various locales. It was music so dear to me, as I'd heard the bell tones daily for years now. But this morning, they seemed particularly celestial, as they chimed from every corner of Leighton's Webster Groves estate. Except that this wasn't Leighton's Webster Groves estate. It was ours, Detweiler's and mine. When Eric first came to live with us, we were living in the tiny cottage on the edge of the grounds. The place had been a large garage until Leighton converted it into an oversized writing studio. But the building didn't work for him, so he'd rented it to me, back when it was just me and my daughter Anya. As Detweiler joined us, and then Eric and Bronnie, the tiny space became far too crowded for 3 adults and 2 children, not to mention a big dog and 2 cats. Meanwhile, a change in his finances forced Leighton to put his big family house up for sale. Like a fairy godmother, Lorraine waved a magic wand and, presto changeo, in a move worthy of reality television, we had effected a house swap. It all worked out perfectly, especially because, in the meantime, Leighton and Lorraine had fallen in love. She agreed to move in with him. The big old Habersham mansion, with its multiple floors and stairs, was too cumbersome for a woman with MS, but the cottage suited her down to the ground. So we gained the space our growing family needed, and they doted on their cozy nest. Best of all, the close proximity encouraged Lorraine to take on the role of Aunt Laurie, while Leighton was already an ersatz uncle to the children. I couldn't have been more pleased. Hillary Clinton was entirely right. It does take a village to raise a child. As Laurie read our vows from her Unity Book of Prayer, Eric hopped up and down, catching flakes on his tongue. Because he'd lived his whole life in California, Eric had never seen snow. Each snowflake offered new temptation. At first, Anya tried to stop him. They were holding hands, so she simply gave his a tug. But Eric proved more determined. She's an indulgent big sister, so she let him have his fun. Meanwhile, I listened to the words that would officially make me Mrs. Chad Detweiler, and I agreed to take him as my husband. "I now pronounce you man and wife," said Laurie. Eric jumped up to catch a snowflake. I reached for him, worried that he'd topple off of the gazebo. Then came a loud crack, and a bullet tore a hole in the hood of my cape. "Get down!" Throwing myself at the children, I pushed them off the gazebo and into a snowbank. "Shoot her! 2 o'clock!" screamed Detweiler. "I'm on it," responded Hodjo. I glanced up to see Brawny cock her arm and let something silver fly. Simultaneously, Gracie streaked past as she went running toward the shed with her leash trailing behind. Detweiler and Hodjo jumped awkwardly off the gazebo and ran after Gracie. Leighton must have knocked Lorraine off the side of the structure, as I had done with the kids, because I heard her metal walker clank against the wooden frame. Hot on Gracie's heels, Paolo flew past, barking up a storm. "Anya? Eric? You okay?" I stared into the wide eyes of the kids. "Uh-huh," said my daughter. Eric's lower lip quivered, but he nodded in agreement. "Stay here." I crawled on my elbows around the back of the gazebo. Lorraine was blinking up at the sky. Leighton was on all fours, talking to her. I glanced into Leighton's wide eyes. "You two okay?" "I think so. Lorraine?" He brushed snow from her hair. Yes, I'm fine." She began babbling. "Kiki, Anya, Eric, the baby." Right as rain. The snow cushioned my belly. "I'm going to check on the kids." 2 more loud cracks followed. Brawny appeared out of nowhere. She flew through the air and landed next to me in a crouch reminiscent of Superman arriving to save the day. "Anyone hurt?" "I don't think so." "Split up. Leighton, grab Lorraine and come with me. Kiki, take the kids and run toward the shed. Stay there." Why the shed? I wondered as I pulled up Anya by the hand, and she helped me with Eric. We hustled awkwardly toward the wooden structure. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw Brawny working with Leighton to carry Lorraine toward the big house. Of course. Brawny had thought this through. If we'd all headed the same way, we would have jammed up at the door. That would have left me and the kids exposed while we jostled to get inside. Cunningly, Brawny had split us up to keep us safe. Eric was too confused to cooperate, so Anya and I each took a hand and lifted him so that his feet skimmed the surface of the snow. When we were close enough, I used my foot to give the side door to the shed a mighty kick. It clattered open. Our eyes adjusted to the dark. Monroe, the donkey, nickered a greeting. He loves my kids, but has little patience for most people. "Go get behind Monroe," I told the kids. "You first." Luckily for us, Brawny had mucked out his stall just a few hours ago. It's a chore she loves because it reminds her of the farm she grew up on near Aberdeen. The small shed smelled like fresh hay, leather, and donkey. They wriggled their way past the surprised animal. His soft lips grabbed at them, searching for bits of apple. Anya always keeps pieces in her pockets, so she transferred hers to Eric. The familiar task of feeding Monroe seemed to calm the boy down. "Get down low, in the straw," I said, heaping it up and over them. "I want you to hide. Stay there." On the other side of Monroe's pen was a pitchfork. Against a shooter, it wouldn't do much, but it was better than nothing. I grabbed it. A smaller shovel with a pointed blade was also on the organizing hanger. That would work for Anya, so I took it, too. "If the shooter comes in," I said, "we don't want him to know we're here. But if he advances on us, if he looks like he wants to hurt us, I won't hesitate to use this. Anya, you do the same." "What about me?" asked Eric. "I'm strong." I grabbed a small bucket next to the tool rack. "This can hurt if you have to hit someone in the head, okay?" "Uh-huh." We settled in, my two little soldiers and I, as sirens wailed in the distance. 4. Monroe loves us. I hated to think that I was putting him in danger, but I knew that, if asked, the stalwart donkey would give his life for my children. Or, at least, that's what I told myself. The shed is about 20 by 25 feet, with 2 people doors, one facing the house and one facing the cottage. There's also a larger garage door type of opening that leads from Monroe's pen into his tiny fenced-in pasture. The floor of the structure is poured concrete. The whole building is covered by an overhanging tin roof, so Monroe can get out of the sun, but still enjoy the fresh air. His stall takes up most of the back half of the shed on the left side. The right half of the shed houses Leighton's gardening tools, plus bins for Monroe's food. When you step inside from either door, there's a sort of foyer, room where you can stand and pet Monroe. The sides of his stall are about 3 feet high and solid. An intruder couldn't immediately see that my kids and I were hunkered down. Brawny had instinctively directed us here, giving her time to get Lorraine up the back stairs and into the big house. In retrospect, her choice had made sense. The house was warm, and Lorraine couldn't handle chills. We'd been pushing our luck having the ceremony outside. Brawny had also recognized that the kids and I could hide under the hay, something that would have been infinitely harder for Lorraine and Leighton. As I settled down to wait for the all-clear, Eric started to cry. Little sniffles, but enough to alarm me. "Hey, sweetie, this is like a game. It's kind of fun to be hiding down here with Monroe, isn't it?" "I wet my pants. I'm cold." "Oh, dear. Can you pull them off? I'll grab Monroe's blanket over there on the wall." Of course, I'd have to totally expose myself again, but what choice did I have? "I'll help him get his clothes off," said Anya. "Anya, have I ever told you that you're an angel? Remember that next time I want to go to the mall." In a matter-of-fact way, she tugged at her brother's sodden breeches. After looking both ways to see that the path was clear, I snuck around Monroe and out the swinging door to the stall. I could vaguely make out the whoop, whoop, whoop of a distant siren. That gave me comfort, but I knew better than to depend on the cavalry coming. I needed to keep my children safe until I was sure the situation was under control. "Let's wrap you in this." I held up Monroe's blanket after grabbing it from its accustomed spot on the far wall. Is there ever a sight more endearing than the naked backside of a child? Despite the gravity of the situation, or maybe because of it, his sweet little behind tickled me. I choked back laughter. "I am a big boy, and I wear pants." Eric turned an angry face on me. "Shh. Of course you are. I'm dressing you like Brawny. This will be your kilt, sir. What a fine Scot you'll make." He gave me a dubious look, much at odds with his bare skin. "Aren't you cold?" That reminded him that he had more at stake here than his honor. I wrapped him tightly in the blanket, tucked it in at the waistband, adjusted his coat over the kilt, and then we settled back down. If I'd had my cell phone, I could have called Detweiler to see if he was okay, but my bridal finery did not include pockets. There was nothing we could do but to hide and wait. "Mom, there's a hole in the hood of your cape." Anya fingered the fabric. "That bullet was really, really close." If Eric hadn't jumped up for that snowflake, if I hadn't bent slightly to make sure he didn't topple off the gazebo, the bullet would have hit him. 5. I knew we shouldn't even try to leave until Detweiler arrived. Eric was warmer now that he was wearing the blanket, so we hunkered down and played I Spy. Monroe tolerated us, but I wasn't sure how long he'd be on his best behavior. Leighton had adopted Monroe after he was booted out of a petting zoo. Seems the quadruped took exception to anything pint-sized and wearing a diaper. Since most of the visitors to a petting zoo happened to be less than 2 feet high and incontinent, that presented a huge problem. Shortly after the donkey chased down his 4th toddler, the folks at the zoo decided they needed to make other arrangements, as in final arrangements, as in they're coming from the dog food factory to take you away. Fortunately for Monroe, Leighton was a board member, and when he heard of the animal's plight, he intervened. Thus Monroe became the only donkey in Webster Groves. Oh, I'm sure we have our share of jackasses, like every other town, but as for quadrupeds, Monroe is our one and only. Anya had just guessed Eric's I Spy target, the broom hanging on the far wall, when Monroe's whiskers twitched nervously. Snuffling, he tossed his head and stamped his feet. His eyes showed their whites, and his ears pricked at attention. I figured this was donkey language for "get out of my crib," so I scratched him under his chin in an attempt to make him happy. But he jerked his head out of my reach and brayed at the door pointing to the cottage. A split second later, it flew open. I caught a glimpse of a man who came skidding inside. I pushed Eric and Anya down deeper into the hay. Then I joined them, as best I could. The intruder panted loudly, but he gave no indication that he'd seen us. Coming in from the bright outside light had temporarily blinded him. To find us, he'd have to get inside the stall, get past Monroe, and dig in the hay. But first, he'd have to realize we were hiding. I was feeling kind of smug, although scared, when Monroe nickered angrily at the man. Drat! I could hear the intruder, but not see him. The way he huffed and puffed suggested that he had been running. But was he the chased or the chaser? Could he be an undercover cop? Had he come in a police car with its sirens blazing? I couldn't risk getting this wrong. His breathing became more even, and I heard his soles slap the concrete. "I know you're in here. Come on out. I won't hurt you." Right. He certainly wasn't a cop. I shook my head at the children and put a finger to my lips, warning them not to respond. But Eric whimpered softly. Anya wrapped her arms around him, shielding the boy with her body. Her troubled eyes turned to me for guidance. Patting the air, I hoped to reassure them that everything was fine, but Eric responded with a loud hiccup. "I hear you," said the man. His footsteps came closer to the pen. "I'm not happy that you're hiding. Come on out or else." I shook my head no, vigorously, warning the kids. Monroe stomped his feet and did the iconic Eeyore his breed has perfected. Instinctively, Anya flattened herself and her brother against the back wall. Eric burrowed his face in her neck. His cries were softer, but the damage was done. That's when I realized that, unwittingly, I'd chosen to make us easy targets. True, I'd chosen the only hiding place, but I'd also backed up.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?